Thank you for joining us. I'm here with SithReign.
Hello.
We're going to be discussing how powerful we believe Ezra is going to become over the duration of Star Wars Rebels. So, before we get too in depth, we're going to take a turn each at discussing where we believe Ezra's current level is and how his progression has gone over the first two seasons of Star Wars Rebels. So, why don't you start us off with that, SithReign?
Yeah, all right. So when Ezra was first found by Kanan, although he had a instinctual ability through his life and on the streets of Lothal, he wasn't much of the Jedi that we see him as today. But he always had this uncommon adeptness in connecting to others through the Force, and this was even more developed through his training with Kanan, I think. And partly, I believe this is because of his open, like carefree personality, and through that he's not afraid to show his emotions. And these emotions, although they might be a weakness to some people, also provide him with empathy, which a lot of Jedi lacked. Because without empathy, these Jedi weren't able to. They tried to do the right thing, but they weren't able to. Because the fatal flaw of many Jedi is, I believe, to be pride, however much they might deny it. And this is evident in Hortoth's story in KOTOR. Jolie tells this story, and for those who haven't told this story, I'll probably edit it in later. So at this point, I don't think Ezra has progressed to the point where he is an average Jedi Knight. He's just still a Padawan in training, and you can sort of see him as a Set Hearth parallel if you've read the Bane novels. He's like Set Hearth would be an Ezra gone wrong, if you will. So, well, we'll see what his story foretells after his opening of the Sith holocron.
Yeah, no, I agree on a lot of those points, and I think he's probably still only a Padawan now, but his progression thus far has been pretty impressive. Probably something comparable, I think, to Anakin. When we look at, I think Rebels has only been over about 2 years now, and we've already seen him progress greatly. Kanan's also seen growth along with Ezra, so I feel that's a pretty special connection when someone of like Ezra's ability is able to also push his master to grow as well.
Yeah, because Kanan wasn't really a knight at the end of the Clone Wars. He was still a Padawan. He was knighted during the series by Yoda in that Force vision of sorts. So it'll be interesting to see how Kanan progresses as well, because at the end of the second season, Ezra was able to fight Kanan to a draw in lightsaber combat. So I'm not sure what this says about Ezra as much as it says about Kanan's lack of skill, but it'll still be interesting to see how both of them progress as both individuals and as Jedi. So
Yeah, I also agree, especially with the draw, because that episode caught me off guard a fair bit because especially in probably the back half of season 2 we've seen Ezra's growth speed up considerably, especially looking at the most recent combat with the Sith Inquisitors, especially since the brothers and the sisters have been introduced. We've seen both Ezra and Kanan pretty rapidly begin to increase in skill. And I think something that was pretty impressive and has stuck with me is he's had access now to some holocrons from Ahsoka, which has enabled him to study Anakin, and I think it's shown that he's actually very quickly adapting what he's seen in holocrons into combat, and it also caught Kanan off guard.
it did, because at the start of the season, Ezra was visibly seen to be struggling at learning Kanan's Form 5 and Form 3 sequences, and particularly Form 5. But later on, after viewing Anakin's holocron, it was you could see that Ezra was using Form 4 sequences within his combat, like jumping around using acrobatic skills, and that was really impressive because just from studying a holocron, he was able to apply that to his knowledge and apply that to actual combat, especially with Inquisitors, which are supposedly Kanan and Ezra's equals in this series. So, yeah, I believe that to be quite an impressive feat that Ezra pulled off during the first two seasons of Rebels. But we'll have to see how, as a lightsaber duelist, he develops. But I don't really believe that Ezra's gonna become like a Luke Skywalker or what Anakin Skywalker could become later on in life, because mainly because Ezra like look at him now. His force potential is powerful. He does have the potential to become a great Jedi, as both Maul and Kanan noticed. But well, is he really a standout as a Jedi initiate? If he was in the Clone Wars, if he was just a force potential or a force sensitive that was in the Clone Wars, would he really be as special as he is now? I think that's a question that we have to consider.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. It's hard when you look at it because right now we perceive him as probably being special just because there's only a few Jedi left. So we're comparing him, like a lot of the Inquisitive we've seen thus far are probably really only Padawan level as well. So while we consider some of the things that Ezra's done as being very impressive, they are against opponents who are like very low level and something that we wouldn't really see in the original trilogy or any of the expanded universe as like main villains. They are very, very far below the level of a standard villain in any of the expanded universe or the original trilogy.
Yeah, that's entirely so. Like, if you look at the Inquisitors, Kanan and Ezra, they were struggling to defeat them, and then Maul just steps in and just handles them like they're nothing. He just destroys all three of them, or was it three? Yeah, three of them. So it's hard to know how powerful Ezra is right now, but it is. I said in one of my past videos that I would be interested in seeing how Ezra's legacy will unfold, and I think a lot of people in the comments on that video interpreted that as how powerful Ezra will become and how much of a lightsaber duelist he'll be, how much of a force user he'll be. But by that, I really just meant more so that I wondered what kind of influence that he would have on the Star Wars universe at large. Because he seems to genuinely want to make a difference, genuinely make the universe of Star Wars better. But of course, he's not seen in episode 4 of the movie, so I'm not sure how they're going to end this series. Yeah, they're probably going to continue it later on. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think what you touch on there is probably the greatest limiting factor for Ezra is actually time, because he's very constrained to a very small period now. Like, I think there's only about 3 years until the events of Rogue One and the original trilogy, so despite like his rapid growth and the things he's trying to achieve, he's significantly limited by time to actually achieve any of these goals and progress as like a lightsaber duelist and his abilities with the Force, because we hear nothing of them come the original trilogy. So we have to assume that whatever part they've played is finished, whether that be through death or just going to the sidelines. We're unsure, but the time factor is really going to hamper how far Ezra can grow. So I'm not sure what your opinion is on what we can expect from him in the next few years, since it's pretty constrained.
I think at his best, Ezra might become a Maul level duelist. And that's saying a lot, because Maul is a great martial art, like a martial duelist. And in Force level, I think he'd be like a Galen Merrick, a Star Killer type figure at his highest peak. But of course, that's what he'd become if he expressed his entire potential. So you don't really know what's going to happen. But one interesting thing about Ezra is that he uses the Force instinctively. And that's really dangerous, if you know what I mean. Anakin did the same thing, and look where he ended up. Mace Windu touches upon that in Shatterpoint, the novel, where he says that discipline is not an instinctual thing. Ezra is basically, however much he might be trying to become a Jedi, his base characteristics portray him as not a Jedi. He's he's susceptible to emotion, and because of that, I think that Ezra's fall, it might be a stretch, but then a lot of people are saying that Ezra will fall to the dark side, and I think it's inevitable, because look at Ezra right now. His emotions, like I said before, also provide him with empathy, but it's a weakness, ultimately.
I think the biggest problem, especially with emotion, is he's also a teenager. So as far as like emotions and being a teenager go, I think that's definitely part of the reason why we've seen Maul take such an interest in Ezra as well. Like, we've seen it already in the season
Maul
finale.
knows what he can do.
Exactly. He knows what he can do, and especially what he's capable of if he taps into his emotions. And Ezra knows right and wrong, and he's been taught by Kanan to a certain extent. And he knows, as we saw, when and how far to go, but never over the edge. But the problem with his age, basically, is that of something very similar to Anakin, where they can know the path to the dark side and all the things they shouldn't do. But emotions, especially at that age, it's just so easy for a couple of events to line up together and them to descend to the dark side, and it pretty much be too late for them to ever turn back. So I'm not sure what role Kanan's going to play in stopping what I do believe now to be like an inevitable outcome is he will turn to the dark side. The question is really just how. Is it going to be through the death of Kanan or another character, or something to do with the truth of his parents' death, or perhaps even Maul himself slowly bringing him to the dark side? Although I'm not sure what your thoughts are about Maul, because after the last episode, I think it's going to be more difficult for Maul to play a direct role in his descent, but perhaps he might manipulate some events from afar.
But Ezra will have to find a new master at some point. Kanan can't teach everything that Ezra needs to know to become a Jedi, or to become a Force user in general. Maul is the most likely candidate, and that would be scary because it'd be using Ezra's Force potential for the dark side. And I'm not sure, but there's an encounter in the Rebels TV series where Ezra is talking about how he wants to become indoctrinated to the Jedi Order. He wants to become a Jedi. And Kanan, this is the point where Kanan is saying like, oh, your emotions are controlling you. I don't think you can become a Jedi. At the start of the season, of course, the first season. And Ezra does show a want of developing the discipline that is necessary to become a Jedi. But in much the same way, peace is not the norm of society. The Jedi are remarkable in that they have trained themselves to maintain this facade of peace. But under that, they all have emotion. So, and Ezra even more so. So, of course, Ezra will have to find a way to control these emotions, and Maul definitely will try to release them. So, although Kanan might try to teach Ezra whatever he can and everything he can, Ezra will have to find a new master that will be able to teach him to control his emotions. And I think that another likely candidate might be Yoda himself, because Yoda is still alive at this point, and Yoda played a direct part in Galen Merrick's training when they met on Dagobah. So it's not far-fetched to say that Yoda will play a large part in Ezra's training as well.
Yeah, I agree, because as we know with Kanan, the amount he has to teach Ezra is pretty limited at this point, especially they're on a similar level, and now Kanan has his own path, basically. He's blind, so he now needs to teach himself to adapt to this new condition. And I think a lot of next season is going to be Kanan. He's got to focus on himself and regaining his former abilities through his new, basically a handicap now. So that's going to put Ezra by himself. And we did see him with that Sith holocron, so I kind of expect that he's going to find something in that holocron that's going to keep him occupied, whether it be with his training or taking a new path. But as you said about Yoda, I'd have to imagine that's going to be the person who's going to train Ezra, because there's just no way at this point Yoda, having sensed and beginning to understand who Ezra is, would allow him to go unguided, especially with his potential. It would just be out of this world to imagine someone like Yoda would actually allow Ezra to go down the path of the dark side, because he's basically forging his own path. So I'd expect that Yoda's going to have to intervene at some point and help him. That is, of course, under the assumption that we don't see the return of Ahsoka. Otherwise, I'd consider her a possible master for Ezra as well in the interim, but do you have any feelings about Ahsoka, or you think she won't be returning to take on that role?
I'm not sure about that, because a lot of people have told me on your videos and my videos, that in the comments that Ahsoka survived, and there's like this image of her leaving the scene at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And some of the other friends that I had, they're talking about they see it as a Force ghost, but I don't think that's entirely true. I think Ahsoka is still alive, but I don't think that she'll play as large a role in Ezra's training as many people think they would, because he has the Sith holocron now, so a potential master that would be born of that would be whoever is inside the holocron, the gatekeeper of the holocron. And in my theory videos, I said that Darth Treya or Kreia might be the gatekeeper of the particular holocron that Ezra took. So seeing Ezra learn from Kreia would be interesting too, because Kreia isn't a Jedi or a Sith at this point, and bringing her back would also be bringing back the mysteries that she has within her character. So I don't know how Ezra's gonna learn from this holocron, but if it is Kreia, it's gonna be interesting, because Kreia has these really weird philosophies about how the Force should be destroyed, and how good doesn't necessarily equal superficially, what may seem good doesn't necessarily equal what is good. So Ezra, being like I said before, being susceptible to wanting to do the right thing for the galaxy, might unknowingly become swayed under Kreia's influence.
Yeah, and she's definitely a very dangerous character for Ezra, because he's definitely, he's lost his parents, and now he's probably without Kanan's guidance for at least the foreseeable future, since Kanan's probably going to be on the sidelines. So, and he kept that holocron, and we saw in the final episode, basically, he took it off to his room by himself and activated it. So, at least to some degree, he keeping it pretty much in secrecy to pretty much learn its secrets, because at least, yeah, he's definitely going in the right direction. Unlike other characters we've seen, he does want to do the right thing. But the question is, what will he do to accomplish that? Because, as you said about Kreia, especially, like, the lines become pretty blurred when it comes to be with, like, what you believe to be good and what is actually good. So, especially for someone like Ezra, I'm actually not sure how far he's going to be willing to go to accomplish his goals and basically protect his friends, because that can lead to a pretty sort of shaky situation depending on his own personal beliefs as we get closer to that. But yeah, I don't know, I imagine that's going to be towards the end of season 3, that sort of moment where he has to make those
it draws direct comparisons to Anakin and his fall to the darkness. In the end, all he wanted to do was save his friends. Anakin's loyalty was his fatal flaw, and from that he gained the power of the dark side, and through it wanted to accomplish what he couldn't as a Jedi, but eventually that led him to become a Sith Lord. And mentioning that scene at the end of the last episode of season 2, where Ezra is sitting in his room unlocking the holocron, it draws parallels to in season 1 when Ezra takes Kanan's holocron, the one where Obi-Wan Kenobi is addressing the Jedi to run away. And that was actually, in a way, the initiation of Ezra's Jedi training. So maybe in the same way, this scene might be a prelude to Ezra's Sith training, or maybe not Sith, but dark side training.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, because I think, especially with how everything went down with Anakin, I don't expect them to parallel that too closely. So I wonder if the spin will basically be that he's going to have, like, sort of split teachings. You know, he has this Sith holocron, and I'm pretty certain whatever he finds in the holocron is going to lead him on some form of a journey to learn more. Whether that leads him to actually Maul himself or other Sith artifacts, I'm not sure, but I do believe he's going to be learning basically through that holocron and a separate journey, you know, sort of not dark side abilities necessarily, but he's definitely going to be opening his mind to some of the abilities of the dark side and some of the power that comes with it, whilst at the same time still continuing what we perceive as the light side with his training with Kanan and his guidance and that of Yoda. So I think it'll be pretty interesting to see if they sort of mold it together. Maybe not so much like a grey Jedi, but taking a bit of both so that he can become powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on that. Using both light side and dark side to become a Jolie Bindo type character, but I'm not really sure what Ezra is gonna become in the end, because he has to. At this point, he's poorly trained. Well, not well trained. Fairly put, in the light side of the Force, and he's becoming drawn to the dark side of the Force at this, and so what Ezra's going to become in the end, it's solely dependent on how he's able to control himself as a Jedi, and how he's able to control his emotions. So at worst, Ezra's going to become all those theories about Ezra becoming Snoke, and Ezra, because Snoke isn't a Sith, so it's completely plausible. Those in the end might become true, and at best, Ezra will become a sage type character that Jolie Bindo was in KOTOR, living off the land instead of as a Jedi or a Sith.
Yeah, I see what you mean, and that would certainly open up an ending, at least to his story, that wouldn't be...
Yeah, intruding on the movies.
And the show is still on Disney, so I can't imagine the series is basically going to conclude with a good majority of the crew dead.
Yeah, that's true.
It's going to make more sense that they have a little bit more
They all die on Alderaan.
Yeah, that would be a little bit too brutal, unfortunately. So most likely, yeah, you're going to have him going off on his own, pretty much distancing himself from the events of the story as it unfolds. But whatever it is, oh god, I won't be able to handle it if he actually turns out to be Snoke.
Yeah, it's like that one video you uploaded about Snoke being everybody.
Yeah, at this point, that's pretty much what it looks like. Alright, anyway, we can probably conclude it there. I think we've touched on pretty much our opinions of Ezra, pretty much from where he is now, right up until where we think he's probably going to end up at the end of this series. So, did you have any closing thoughts, or did you want to close it out there?
No, it's fine. I think I touched on everything I wanted to, and it's just going to be interesting to see how Ezra develops as a character, because character development is crucial in the Star Wars universe. That's what made Revan such a fan favorite, his incredibly done character development. So, yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Ezra. And probably in the next discussion, we're going to be talking about whether the light side can be used for evil. So look out for that, and thanks for watching.
Yep, thank you very much everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.